The moment I opened the apartment door, I knew something had changed forever. It wasn't because the woman standing there looked different. It wasn't because the late afternoon sun poured through the hallway behind her like something out of a movie. It was because the sadness in her eyes had finally disappeared. When I quietly told her, my roommate won't be home tonight, expecting her to simply drop off the box she was carrying and leave, she smiled with a warmth I had never seen before and answered, "Then I'm staying." In that single moment, every lonely night, every regret, and every unanswered prayer from the past 2 years suddenly felt as though they were leading me towards something I never expected. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a little light in their lives. My name is Nathan, and I lived in a quiet apartment complex just outside Nashville, Tennessee. After my marriage ended, I convinced myself that staying busy was easier than facing the silence. I worked long hours restoring old homes, came back exhausted, microwaved dinner, and spent the rest of the evening pretending television could replace conversation. My roommate, Caleb, had moved in after his construction company downsized. We weren't lifelong friends, but we looked out for each other, shared expenses, and made the empty apartment feel a little less lonely. The woman at my door was Grace, Caleb's cousin. She occasionally stopped by to bring homemade food or help him with paperwork, because he had injured his shoulder months earlier. She was kind without trying to impress anyone. She remembered birthdays, brought cookies for elderly neighbors, and somehow knew everyone's name in the building. Still, our conversations rarely lasted longer than a few minutes. A week before that evening, Caleb accepted a temporary construction job in another state that would keep him away for several weeks. Before leaving, he admitted something that surprised me. He said Grace worried about everyone except herself. Since losing both of her parents within a short time, she had spent years taking care of everyone else's problems while quietly carrying her own grief. He hoped she would eventually learn that she deserved support too. When Grace stepped inside that evening carrying a casserole dish, the apartment felt different. Instead of rushing away, she wandered into the kitchen, laughed at my terrible attempt to organize the cabinets, and insisted on helping me cook something better than frozen meals. Hours slipped by as we talked about childhood memories, embarrassing mistakes, dreams we had quietly buried, and the strange ways life changes without asking permission. There was no romance in the air, only two people discovering how deeply loneliness can hide behind ordinary smiles. As the weeks passed, Grace continued visiting. Sometimes she brought fresh bread from the local bakery. Sometimes we simply sat on the balcony watching rain fall over the neighborhood. She encouraged me to reopen the woodworking shop I had abandoned after my divorce. I encouraged her to apply for the elementary school librarian position she secretly wanted, but believed she wasn't qualified for. Little by little, we became mirrors, reflecting hope back into each other's lives. Then everything nearly fell apart. One afternoon, I overheard two neighbors gossiping. They assumed Grace was only spending time with me because Caleb had asked her to keep an eye on his lonely roommate. Their careless words settled heavily in my heart. I convinced myself our friendship had been built on pity instead of genuine care. Rather than asking Grace the truth, I withdrew. I stopped answering messages, buried myself in work, and allowed old insecurities to win once again. Nearly 2 weeks passed before there was another knock on my door. Grace stood there holding the same casserole dish she had carried the first evening we truly talked. She looked disappointed but calm. She explained that kindness should never be mistaken for obligation. She had chosen to spend time with me because she felt safe, respected, and understood in a way she hadn't experienced for years. She reminded me that healing only happens when people are brave enough to believe they deserve it. Her words broke something inside me, not in pain, but in freedom. For the first time since my marriage ended, I realized I had been protecting myself so fiercely from disappointment that I had also shut out joy. Months later, Caleb returned home to find the apartment filled with laughter, fresh paint, and handmade furniture from my reopened workshop. Grace had earned a librarian position, and neighborhood children adored her weekly reading afternoons. Our building slowly became a place where neighbors shared meals instead of passing each other without a word. One act of staying had quietly transformed far more than one lonely evening. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that hope often arrives in the most ordinary moments. Your support allows stories like this to continue inspiring others around the world. Before we reach the end, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment and tell us about a person whose simple kindness changed your life when you least expected it. Looking back, I often think about that ordinary sentence I spoke without much thought. My roommate won't be home tonight. I believed I was describing an empty apartment. Grace showed me I was really describing an empty heart, waiting to be filled with friendship, trust, forgiveness, and hope. Sometimes life doesn't change because someone makes a grand speech or performs a heroic act. Sometimes everything changes because one compassionate person smiles, chooses to stay, and reminds another soul that they were never meant to face life's hardest seasons alone.